Hi, and welcome to the Vanessa Eriksson podcast. I'm Vanessa, your host, here to bring you meaningful conversations on data, AI, innovation, and leadership. Today's episode is about cracking the code on diversity, tech, and the future of work. And with me, I have none other than Anna Gulliksen, the global head of talent acquisition and employer branding at Tietoevry, a TEDx speaker, and just yesterday she announced her election to the board of Diversity Charter Sweden, one of the world's largest DEI networks. Anna, welcome. Thank you for being here.
Thank you so much for letting me come.
Last month, at the Girls at Tech Nordics annual celebration, you were on the panel with us, along with LinkedIn and Roro and the Wallenberg Foundation. And we all were talking about the future of work. And I am excited because that's what we're going to get into just now. But you are the global talent acquisition head and also employer branding. Tell me, what was it that sparked your passion for getting into this?
You mean in talent acquisition or
Yes.
you mean the tech industry?
Oh, both.
Because that's both, yeah.
Yes.
I think I work within the talent acquisition area for, I would say now nearly 30 years, or 25 at least. And I think the reason why what that sparked me, I think that is I like building relationship and I like to work with people. So I think the combination of working with people, do a bit of sale because that is a bit of the matching, and then actually feel that you are a part of growing someone's career. I think that was part when it comes to talent acquisition, to work with that. So the interest of people and to develop that. And then I joined the tech industry when I started to work for Every, and that is like 7 years ago. And then I entered the tech industry, and then I could take with me the knowledge about talent acquisition, how to work with people, how to do that in a structure and also fair way, and also bring in that to the tech industry.
You have a really impressive career. The TED Talk, which was about fearless. I'm thinking today in this rapid change in the world that we live in today, where there is also fear of the unknown. What is it going to be like? What would you be telling leaders that want to continue the growth, the business growth and the innovation? What's the advice you would give them?
I mean, there are a lot of uncertainty. There is a lot of ambiguity today. But I think one of the most important thing, if you want to create a more of a fearless culture or a really growing culture, is to create the psychological safety. I think you need to start with creating a psychological safety. Then you need to have some boundaries, but a lot of flexibility within. So you need to have the clear boundaries, but a lot of flexibility within. And I think you also need to embrace failure. And especially in Sweden, we are quite good in that we don't want to fail. We are so super cautious and we are so organized. But I think sometimes we also need to understand that from failure, it could also be something good that will develop. So I think that would be my advice to create that type of culture.
I saw that empathy was high on at the World Economic Forum, the report that came out for leadership.
Yeah.
And that's
and
what I
kindness.
hear. Yes,
Empathy and
that's what I
kindness.
hear you say.
Yeah.
Let's dive then into the future of work, because we have 65% of HR executives say that AI enables, it helps them in data-driven decisions, which positively impacts recruitment and retention strategies. When you hear that, what's your immediate thoughts on it?
I think when you talk about data and HR, I think I would rather phrase it like data informative decisions rather than data driven decisions. I think still we are humans that needs to make, we are making the decision, but the data and the things we are basing our decision on could be a lot of the AI technology driven and so forth. So I think you need to be more data informed. And then I think, and it's quite interesting because if you read this service, we can also see in Sweden, we are a bit fear of AI. I think, or maybe the CIOs are, I think it's only 35% that think they are more advanced and also look. So I think Sweden are a bit behind when it comes to adopting AI in the development. And I think that we also talked about this today, that these other service that we are doing here in Sweden when it comes to university, we're looking at the young people. There is also a less the penetration rate or the interest of using AI with young people in Sweden compared to EU is quite low. I think it's only 35% compared to much higher in other organizations. So I think for Sweden it's quite important to embrace this technology, but embrace it with caution, because you also need to understand how to use it. And again, that also brings me back to more data informative than data driven. But there are a lot of opportunities, but you should also be sound and cautious how to use it. But I think we are maybe a bit behind if you're looking into European standards.
I tend to agree with you because also a recent study done by PwC shows that 37% of companies think that AI capabilities will be a requirement in the next 10 years.
Yeah.
In my opinion, I want to be, faster than 10 years.
Yeah.
So going back to what you're saying, we're probably behind because I think that, what 10 years? We need to go faster than that.
Yeah, I think so. And I think also, just to add on that, if you're looking into what are the competence in the future, what will the demands be? And I think you don't know because everything is moving and developing so fast. You talk about this exponential development. But what you could see is then, so you will not know what to do, but how will you then handle the ambiguity? And then I know that we are talk about this 21st and digital and 21st century skills, and we're talking about collaboration. We talk about creativity, critical thinking, and communication. So I think with this technology going faster and faster, what are the generic competences that you need to develop, and then you need to be aware. And I think that is also how will you as a human being also make use of the new technology. That with critical thinking, with creativity, with collaboration, and also to communicate. So I think that is also a way that you also could look when it looks from a more future of work or development and so forth.
Would you then say that that's the advice you would give leaders who are looking to change their ways of, hiring or recruitment and retention, or is there other advice as well?
I think long term, if you look into the high, then if we look in the recruitment it's volatile and it's also quite short term, especially for consultants and businesses as us. And if you're looking into the competences needed today, on a Swedish, or if you're looking in a Swedish context, you could see that there are still the more technical, the more senior, like senior .NET, senior architects and so forth. That is also still like quite high demand. And what you can see now, also in the light of the market as it is today, is that suddenly here in the Nordics, the language is important. So it's not okay only with English. You need to speak fluent Swedish or Norwegian or Finnish. And that you could see is a bit of a shift from a couple of years ago. That combining with these technical skills, seniority, and you also need to be fluent in Swedish, in Norwegian or Finnish. And I think that is also a bit of a shift from last year. But in the long term, I think the competence mentioned, because you don't know what competences we need in the future, so which means that you need to have competences that could handle that creative thinking, critical thinking, communicate about it and collaborate.
What about Tietoevry? Do you see any shifts that have been implemented while, when you're hiring for, specifically within skills and diversity?
I think the majority because one of the reasons why DEI is so important for the tech is the lack of competence. So, and competence is diverse. Competence is not within a sex or age or ethnicity, it is diverse. Which means that we as company need also to ensure that we embrace all the competence, which means that we need to have also more objective and fair ways of finding and attracting and hiring talents. And I think understanding that is also something that we are getting better and better at, I would say. And that could go for hiring practices or recruitment. It could go such an easy thing like a job ad. And we know, if you take a job ad, if you take a job description, we know, and this has been proven by research over and over again, that for a woman, if you have 10 criteria, for a woman just to consider to apply, she needs to fill 8 out of 10, just to apply. And for a man, 5. So already there is an unbalance, which means that if we go back to the job ads, how do we then ensure that we get as many female applicants as male applicants? And there you can work with the tonality, you can work with the picture, but you can also work with the language and the number of criteria. And we actually did some studies on that, and we could also see that the more specific you are, not this long range or the core, if you are more specific, if you use gender neutral language, you actually get more applicants. So that is something, and I think the awareness of that in your hiring recruitment practices, that is actually increasing for many companies, and like ours, that also making the hiring manager aware of quite simple things, but it has quite a big effect on the applicants. And then it's much easier to really make sure that you hire that good person. And it's also on top of that is a woman or a man, but they are equally competent.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I see that you just answered also my question of, we have fewer women applying for tech roles today.
Yeah.
What could we do? But
that is something we could do and make sure and I think also what we as an industry could do, looking into the recruitment practice and the hiring practices, also look into the offices. How inclusive are the offices? Yeah. What type of, is it only sports things that might attract some, but maybe not the majority? What are we talking about? And so I think that is what we can do as industry, and also the role models, of course, because you want to have role models and you want to have people to look up to. And it's much easier to feel included if you are not the only one. You feel more if there are more of you. So I think that is things that we could do as an industry. In the long term, if you go back to your question, how could we get more young? You need to work with interest. And we have doing research together with another company called Insight Intelligence, and doing young females within tech. And we could see that the one most important is interest, to create an interest. And you need to do that early. What we can do as an industry is also to be a bit better of what you actually could do in the tech. I mean, instead of talking about that you learn all this coding language or you work with the C++ or whatever, instead talking about you could actually increase women's health. You could work with poverty. I mean, the output of technical solutions. I think that is also something that we as an industry could be even better in communicating, because then you could really attract people that wants to do, that's more purpose-driven.
Yeah.
Because tech is a lot about purpose.
Congratulations, Anna. You announced yesterday about your board assignment in Diversity Charter Sweden, which is one of the largest networks, DEI networks in the world. And I'm thinking, what are we going to see coming out from that organization? Could you explain a little bit?
I think the Diversity Chart, as you said, is one of the largest DEI networks,
Yeah.
and especially here it consists of 26 charters in Europe. And again, I think, especially in the light of what is happening now, because I think DEI it's not a nice thing to have. It's quite critical. It's business critical. Again, it goes to what I said just before. Competence is diverse. It's not within sex or gender, ethnicity, age, or anything else. So I think to also be more clear about the value that it gives. And we also know that heterogeneous organizations are more creative because you get different perspective, obviously. We can also see they are more productive. And you can also see that boards that are more diverse is also more profitable. So there are so many good evidence that we need to continue. And I think in the light of what is happening, I think we need to drive that even stronger. And we need to do that together. And that, I think, Diversity Charter is a really good network to be a part of, to drive those questions, both in Sweden but also in Europe.
Anna, I see that another class in diversity is ageism. What are your thoughts on that?
I think this is, and especially in Sweden, I mean, there is a lot of discussion. And a couple of years ago, there was a lot about how do we ensure that we get all the young talents. At the same time, we are living until we are 80 or 80 plus, and we are expected to work until we're at least 65. At the same time, you could see that recruiters, company firms are quite not very good in hiring people that are over 50. I'm 60. I really know that I might not be that attractive if I should go out on looking for a new opportunity. Still, I also think that it is a bit of a challenge for organization because it also goes to cost, but it also goes to competence. But I think there is also today, because age is not only biological. Age is also how do you define yourself. And we haven't talked so much about this, but I think also ability to learn and curiosity are extremely important. And you can be as curious as you are when you are 60, and you might not be that curious when you are 40, because that also is a bit about who you are and where you are. So I really think that people, especially when you are 50, when you have grown-up kids, you are quite, you know what you know, so to say, you are more calm in that. So it's really and you have a lot of time, because you don't have, as you ask me, I don't have any time to be, time is, you are available. So I think that there are so much flexibility in using more experienced people. They are not that, maybe they are not as spot on or sharp in understanding everything, but they can reflect, they can analyze, they can compromise, and they can also, they could take a step back and just analyze the situation, and then you make the right move. So I think it's a really underestimated capacity. And I think that some organization is really good, I would say, and also value that type of knowledge that you need, but it's also about, because, and I think that goes that just because you are 50 or 60, or you don't have the right to be to have your right, so to say. It's also about that you should also deserve it. I think even though that I'm 60, I still need to deserve what I'm doing. And what I mean by that is that you still need to perform. You need to be curious. You need to be knowledge about the things.
Yeah.
So and that doesn't go away because you are more experienced. It's much easier when you're experienced. You don't need to, because you have so much knowledge. But it doesn't mean that you don't need to deliver upon that. So I think that is something that you need to really show, or you need to demonstrate that. But I think it is an undervalued competence, and I think now in the light of what's happening with all the organizations, I think, and it's quite interesting, because if you go for a permanent job, you sometimes too experienced, but if you go for an interim, you are super attractive. So it's also about the how companies, how they look into their workforce.
Yeah.
A very long answer, and it's I don't know if it was, if you got the
No,
if I answered your question, but I think it is an underestimated competence in our country.
Thank you. You did answer. I think it is a challenge, and I think we need to be talking about it a little more and
Yes,
openly.
I think
we tend to get a little ashamed, a little shy to say, why not? So I think there's a lot more work required here when you're talking about diversity, because it's not only men and women, it's also different ages.
Yeah.
As a leader, Anna, what do you think is the biggest challenge in attracting and retaining talent?
Oh, that's a hard question. I think that is not age, or I think that is a consistent question. What to do, and I think, again, I have a favorite saying. I say it in Swedish, and it's "Håll i, håll ut," and that is a bit of being a bit conscientious, and also stay where you are, so to say. So I think also, I mean, what does people want? They want a good, solid leader. They want a leader they can trust. They want a leader that will develop them. They want an organization where they will develop, where they will feel that they are good at something, and where they will feel secure. So I think it's about these fundamentals. Be sure that you are providing the psychological safety, provide the area for them to develop, but also it's okay to fail. But also you need to push them, of course. So it's a bit push and pull. And psychological safety.
And psychological safety. If you could change one thing about companies, their approach to hiring or building, really value-adding teams, what would you change?
I think when it comes to hiring, I think structure and standards are very undervalued. Having a standardized process, have a structured process, which means that you are consistent, that you are compliant, all this kind of boring word, but I think that is really undervalued when it comes to work with people. And why is that? And I think that one of the reasons is that we as human individuals, we are subjective, we are biased because we are humans, but having processes that also mitigate that. I think that is an undervalued. When it comes to culture, I think it's also about building a culture where you are able to develop, where you have the psychological safety, where you can be creative, learn, and also be transparent about that.
Thank you. My last question. What's the one piece of advice you would give young professionals who are navigating their careers?
I think stay grounded. Make sure that you are good at something, and make sure that you're good at the thing you want to do. So be a bit grounded on that. Think of, and that could sometimes be hard, but I think if you think, because you might not have that work experience, but what type of leadership do you want? And what type of culture and organization do you need? So I think, again, try to be where you are. What type of organization, where do I see myself in a couple of years? And be also conscientious and a bit consistent on that as well.
Håll i.
Håll i, håll ut.
Thank you, Anna. It was such a joy to have you here and share your knowledge and experience with all of us. Thank you for watching. And if you haven't subscribed already, what are you waiting for? I look forward to our next episode and you joining us. Bye for now.
If you enjoyed this episode, please like and subscribe, and stay tuned for more.